release aging people in prison. Around the country, there are, you could Google and you would find that every major news media, every newspaper has done a story over the last 5 years on aging in prison, whether it's about the growing problem of dementia, whether it's about the problem of health issues, whatever it is. But to our knowledge, this is the only group that is saying the solution to that problem is not to build better geriatric units in prison, but is to release aging people in prison.
Absolutely.
And we did that for a few reasons. One is that it's a crisis. The population of the New York prison system has fallen over the last 10 years because of the reforms on the Rockefeller drug laws and other reforms, because the bloated mass incarceration is a crisis in this country, and states and the feds can't pay for it anymore. So everyone's talking about decarceration. But people are talking about growth from the front end, which is great. We fully support that. Kids shouldn't be going to prison. Kids who get in trouble shouldn't be sent to prison. You know, there are a lot of things we could say about that. But we're also saying, let out the people who have done a long time, who pose no risk to public safety. Let's keep our system of incarceration from staying what it is now, which is a mill of permanent punishment, revenge, retribution, keeping on going till the end of time. We're saying let's make a crack in that system by saying that everyone who is ready to return to the community should be released. A lot of the talk you hear now about prison reform talks about low risk. Every newspaper article talks about we should release the low-risk people. What they mean by that, because they don't know who's low risk, they mean nonviolent drug offenders, people who didn't commit a crime of violence. The people who have the lowest risk of recidivism are older people who've served a long time in prison and were convicted of what? First-degree murder. And what we're saying is that if reform takes place and it doesn't include people who are convicted of violence, first of all, it's not going to work in New York State because 64% of New York State prisoners are in for a violent act. And second of all, it will only perpetuate what I said before, permanent punishment, and we will have the same situation later. Okay, so those are some of the issues. We're talking about a lot of different people when we're talking about elders in prison. First of all, we're talking about anyone over the age of 50, and last night at the big event connected with this conference, a woman said to me, I'm 51, I don't consider myself an elder. And I said, well, if you were in prison, you might, because people in prison age about 10 years faster than people on the street. And you know, when you read about that, some people will say it's because of lifestyle choices and this and that. Having
because
been
of prison
for 14 years, I know what it is. It's from the stress, from the lousy health care, from the fact that to be treated like a human being, you have to basically risk going into solitary confinement to stand up for yourself. All those things create a faster aging. So that's one thing. We're talking about everyone over the age of 50. We're talking about people who are very ill. We're talking about people who are infirm. And that's what the news media sort of links to, is the people who are in wheelchairs or who are on life support. But we're not just talking about that. We're talking about people who are fully healthy and are senior citizens and who could contribute to the community. We're talking about all those things. So when we say if the risk is low, let them go, that's kind of a snappy way to say reconsider the question of risk, reconsider the purpose of a prison system, and change it from the bottom up. So our panel today is a bunch of very courageous people. And our panel represents the populations that have created this moment in time where we are facing a possibility of change and reform. Because all of the change has come, change comes from within, you know that little slogan? Change comes from the people within the prison system. And so we have Larry White, formerly incarcerated 32 years. We have Parole Muhammad, formerly incarcerated 26 years. We have the family members of 2 men who have been incarcerated for many years. We have Barbara Innes from Albany, and we have Jaqui Keone Siddiqui from Brooklyn, both of whom are married to older men who are incarcerated who have done many years.
Yes.
And we have Ariane Davison, who is a Columbia graduate student and who works with RAPP, interviewing the people who are affected by this issue of aging in prison. And she is going to speak last to share some of what she's been learning. But the reason I say courageous is that you have to kind of bear your pain and your, not pain, your joy and your victory in order to talk about this issue. And the continued incarceration of elders is a human rights violation. It's, and I mean that in terms of the UN, whatever charters there are on the dignity of human beings and their rights. There's a right to have all generations represented in your community. And if elders are incarcerated at huge numbers from certain communities, mostly we're talking about Black and Latino communities, that's disrupting the lives of those communities on the outside. That's a human rights violation. Denying people the right to define their own hygiene, their own health care, their own, what's the word, the being able to defend your own body. And as women, some of us who are in prison, we know how important that was as a battle we had to wage in prison. That is a human rights violation. So we are going to talk today about the human beings whose rights are being violated. And just one last thing before I start asking everyone some questions, is that one of the reasons we wanted to do this panel is that we really want to win this struggle. And in order to do so, we need people to step up, to join, people who will help and people who will speak. We need the family members, we need the formerly incarcerated people to be able to say, we are the people that you're talking about. We are the people who should be out here with you, and we are the people who should stop suffering for this sickness of permanent punishment and repression in this society. So I'm going to start with Larry White, and I'm going to ask him to talk about what it is to be an elder in prison, what it is to be a young man looking at being an elder in prison. And he's going to talk about one experience that he went through with parole that's going to point us to one of the main ways that we are saying this issue could be resolved. So Larry.
Yeah, Larry.
What I really want to do is to understand that this is a process that's taking place. I call it the prison aging process, how a person ages in prison. There are 2 ways that takes place. A person gets sentenced while he is aged already, or a person gets sentenced to long-term incarceration and he ages during that period that he does his time. The greatest percentage of people who go old are people who have long-term sentences, and they go old during that period of time. So that's one thing. So we can start with our long-term prisoners. All right, they present a problem. They present a problem to the Department of Correctional Services, primarily because they have long sentences, and primarily because we have a parole system, all right, that extends the amount of time a person serves on those long-term sentences.
Right.
Okay. A person comes to prison, a long-termer comes to prison, he starts out as what we call a novice long-term. He's just beginning his sentence, all right? And he has to do 2 primary things. First of all, he has to address the fact that he'll be here for a long time, right? And how does he go about dealing with that? The other thing that he has to deal with is how does he construct a prison life, all right, that will let him survive that long period of time. A person, he stays in that period of being a novice for about 3 to 5 years. All right, during that period of time, he learns to adjust to the system. During that period of adjustment, all right, he becomes what we call a seasoned prisoner, a seasoned long-termer. A seasoned long-termer is one who has to figure out how is he going to survive that period of time until he comes up for release consideration. The release consideration will generally cover that whole period of time that he serves on his minimum sentence. And we're talking about now, I'm explaining the sentence to you. Indeterminate sentence has 2 parts, a minimum part and a maximum part. The minimum part is how much time he must serve before he becomes eligible to be released. All right? And it's during that period of time that a person has to develop, all right, some sort of program background and disciplinary background, behavioral background that shows that he has changed over this period of time, and he should be released on the basis of his change. The sentence itself holds an unspoken promise, and sometimes this promise is given by the judge. When the judge sees a person that he sentenced, gets mad and gets ready to go, he tells him, slow down, He says, I gave you a sentence. The large part of your sentence, the back part of your sentence, but myself, I had 25 years. Now you see 25 years, I was ready to go off in the court. He says, slow down. 25 years, if you do 25 years the way you're supposed to and make the kind of changes that we're looking for at 25 years, you will go home. And that promise resonates with everybody who receives those kind of long-term sentences. That if he does his minimum sentence right, if he programs right, does his behavior right, he will go home. So when he goes into the prison system tells him the same thing. These are the programs that you've got to involve yourself in to make those kind of changes that will indicate that you can be released and remain at liberty without being removed. So during that long period of time, you struggle. You go through all the programs, and I mean, there's all kinds of programs. And there are people who have started out with no basic education at all, have gone through, GED, got their associate's degrees, got their bachelor's and even got their master's degrees, and have outstanding behavioral records, all right? And then when they go to the parole board just overlooks that. I mean, they recognize, oh, you've got a good program background, you really changed, we note your educational, advancements and all that. However, the seriousness of your crime is such that release at this time would be incompatible with the welfare society.
Exactly.
Okay? So now you're in a conduit. I have to go back and say, outstanding record for 25 years. And I go back and I read it, you've been denied parole because of the seriousness of your crime. I can't change the seriousness of my crime. That's done. That's over with. This is supposed to be about rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is about me making obvious changes, all right, that a person can look at and say, this is not the same person who committed that crime. The seriousness of the crime is really supposed to be in the hands of the judge. That's what the judge looks at, and that's what the judge sentences you on. So now I'm faced with, two people. The judge says 25 years, do 25 years the way you're supposed to. You go home, I go to parole board. They say, oh, you've done our 25 years excellently, no problem with that. However, it's the seriousness of your crime. So there's nothing I can do about that. And that kind of prisoner we call a standing prisoner, because there's nothing that he can do. There's no sense in me taking more programs because all the programs I've taken so far have been outstanding and recognized as outstanding. So now I find myself in a conduit. Now, what you have to understand is that the standing prisoner, the one who's been gets hit by the parole board over and over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. What happens is this: they form a funnel into that old age process. When you reach 55 years old in the prison system, you're defined as an aged prisoner, an elderly prisoner. When you reach 65 years old, all right, you become a person who is a geriatric prisoner, a person who is elderly but becomes infirm, all right? And that's the process that's fared the most by everybody. It's not just the fact that I have to sustain myself while I'm fighting to get out of prison. I don't want to become old. To become old in prison is not to be able to take care of yourself. To be in prison is really to be able to sustain, your life costs while you're in there, to take care of yourself. And so, the prospect of growing old in prison, all right, is in and of itself an aging process, all right? And there's not much that a person can do at that particular stage. There's no programs in there. How can I influence the parole board such that they will let me go home? I go to my correctional counsel, the prison officials, and the prison officials don't know. The reason for your denial, seriousness of your crime, there's no way that can be overcome. There's nothing that you can do to change that, And that's the quandary that a person does a long-term sentence and faces the prospect of becoming old in prison, that's what he is.
So just say, how many times did you go to the board?
I went to pro board 4 times.
And the fourth time, what did they say?
And the 4th time, I said I wasn't going back anymore. And it just so happened that the officer in my cell block, who knew me very well, he came and he told me, I was teaching in the school, he came and told me, he said, go to pro board. So you got pictures in the office now, maybe they'll look at your record. And so I went to pro board, and sure enough, they looked at my record and they gave me.
Wow.
Next, I'd ask Terrell Muhammad to speak. And Terrell did 26 years, and the reason I wanted to ask him to speak is that he can tell us what it is, who he left behind, and also how much that group of people in prison can offer to the rest of us. So, Terrell, thank you.
Thank you.
And you can stand up if you want, but I know that you can make yourself heard.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Brother Larry. Also, I'd like to thank Brother Fareed for starting this campaign. Larry and Fareed, they're my mentors.
All right.
He mentioned that he taught in school there. Really, he did. He educated hundreds, if not thousands, of young men. I went to prison at 19, and I got out at 45. And in prison, I was a rebellion youth. I was a young man that, you couldn't tell me anything. I played sports. One day I was playing basketball. I had 20 to life. And a brother came up to me, he said, an old timer, and said, listen, you ain't gonna go to the NBA from here. It didn't resonate immediately. But after a while, I was like saying, what do you mean by that? And he asked me later on when he seen me a few times, he said, you got an education, you went to school? I said, what are you talking about? I got sunburn out, man. I ain't got to go to no school. He said, listen, you need to go to school. Anyway, suffice it to say, I went to the box because of my behavior. And while I'm in the box, I meet people that's been in the box for a long period of time. But some of them political prisoners, some not. And in meeting these men, these were some real wise men. They were able to reach me. They were able to talk to my spirit. And they would tell me, listen, these people will kill you in here and care nothing about you. And no one would know.
True that.
They had a program one time, it was an experimental program. They said that if you take the GED test, we'll cut your box time. So I used to read everything. So I said, I'm gonna take this test. I'm in Attica. I took the test. I passed the test. That's the first time I ever took a test in my life. That gave me so much inspiration that when I got out the box, I took a course called Independent Studies. Did pretty well. Did so well enough that, they transferred me from Attica to Auburn. And they had a college program there. Same brother that told me I wasn't going to make it to the NBA, he was there. And I seen him, we spoke, and I said, I'm kind of interested in going to college. He said, yeah. He said, come on, I'm going to take you to the school building and you sign up. I signed up. Again, all this was testing to see what can I do. The brother who was always on me, his name is Noah Washington.
Yes.
Great brother.
May he rest in peace.
I attribute everything I do today because of him.
Yeah. We loved him too.
See, this is a brother that he passed away in prison.
Yeah.
But his dedication to people like me, it was like water to a thirsty man.
Yeah.
I went to school. I went to Syracuse University. He used to make me go to the library every day. I used to have to read books like Huckleberry Finn. And he used to tell me that Mark Twain was an abolitionist. I didn't know nothing about that. He used to make me read books about Africa. He used to give me a map of Africa and tell me what parts of Africa you know. I didn't know nothing about Africa. He said, when you finish with me, you're going to know every river, every country, every president, every prime minister. And I knew all of that stuff after dealing with this brother. I graduated with a bachelor's degree from Syracuse University. I only had 12 years in at that time. I got 20 years. Understand something. know, I said, man, what I'm gonna do now? I got 20 years, I only did 12. I met other men like him, like Larry,
Right.
like Fareed. You know, these brothers really encouraged me to go further, to push myself. And I remember they used to say, you never know what awaits you in the future. Because I can't see into the future. None of us can. No one can tell me I'd be sitting in front of you telling my story like this. No one. I was able to go and get a master's degree from New York Theological Seminary. That's after I got hit at the board 2 times. Because I said, I got to do something. And I went and got a master's degree. And while I was studying, I used to always reflect on these brothers. I said, here are men that shouldn't be here. They should be out here inspiring people.
That's right.
They should be back in the communities doing the work that they're doing inside.
Yes.
Because they can prevent our youth from going to prison. But they languishing in prison. And no one knows that the power that they got. They took a person like me, who was a nobody, and told me, yo, you can do some things, man. So when I come in front of you, I don't speak for myself. I speak for all of those men that's still there. Those that they make it out. Because their voice need to be heard. These are men who are dedicated to changing lives. I know this for a fact.
It's true.
You see him today. I'm glad my mentor's out here today. I can sit with him. I'm glad Fareed is out here. A brilliant mind.
Yes.
He's out here today. Imagine if his mind was still inside there. We wouldn't know about RAPP campaign. So we have to understand something. The elderly that's in there, those men there, they're languishing, they're dying. And we need them out here because they can change the paradigm of the crimes that affect our community. They can talk to the gang members. We want to know what to do. We want solutions to our problem. They have them. So we have to fight hard for them.
Yep.
I don't want to speak anymore, but that's my say.
Thank you, brother. Woo.
Right. Wow. No one. So many people.
I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the Columbia students for putting this together. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Brother Muhammad, for speaking up the name of our dear brother, Albert Noah Washington. When Brother Larry talked about the quandary, right, of people in prison, well, my husband, Sekou Odinga, like Albert Noah Washington, like Herman Bell, like there are 5 political prisoners here, 5 others in New York State. The quandary that they have about being in the prison system is the fact that the state does not want to let them go, as Laura said, because they want to make examples of them of what not to do, and that they are freedom fighters, and that they fought to change the society and to end all of the conditions that people are dealing with. And so they want to make an example. And so it is not by accident that Sekou has been in prison for 32 years. The brother talked about Jaleel. He went in when he was 19, he's now 60. So that's the quandary, right? Is that people who stand up are sometimes, oftentimes, all the time, made examples of. So when we talk about aging in prison, I want you to think about what is it like aging out here, right? How is it to age out here? Anybody in here over 60?
Yeah, you got.
Can you imagine being in prison at 60? Anybody in here have arthritis?
Yeah.
Diabetes? High blood pressure?
Yeah.
Anybody in here ever had to be on crutches or in a wheelchair?
Laura.
Imagine doing those things and in prison. Think about how many in your lifetime, in the last 30 years, how many funerals of loved ones you've attended. How many deathbeds you sat by with the people that you love who have crossed over to the other side.
but you were there to hold their hand and to say, I love you, and you won't be forgotten.
Right.
How many children have been born into your family? Nieces, nephews, grandchildren. How many high school graduations? How many college graduations? How many celebrations? Every single thing that each and every one of us do on a daily basis. There are people who go into prison at 19 who never get a chance to participate in any of those things. That is wrong. They say that when you want to measure how civilized a society is, look into its prisons. Look at how it treats its most vulnerable.
Yep.
Well, I go into the prison, because not only do I visit my husband, but I visit other political prisoners. I see when I go, and the brothers in here where we know the festivals, the family days, and so you get a different kind of view, right? Because you're in the gym. The first time I went to see that, I was shocked at all the wheelchairs and the canes. How are you supposed to walk the line if you're struggling with a cane? You don't get preferential treatment because you're elderly, because you're in the wheelchair, because you have arthritis. I'm getting ready to have surgery in a couple of weeks, and it's very difficult to walk. But if I was in prison, that would be no excuse. I would have to walk the line. Sekou is in Clinton right now. He's been there for 2 years. The first winter he was there, Clinton is about, I get an hour from Canada. So it's brutally cold up there. His first winter there, he caught pneumonia. Why did he catch pneumonia? What contributed to it? Because the phones are outside.
In the yard.
So anytime he wants to call me, he wants to call his son. If it's 10 below, he has to stand outside.
Right.
Sometimes I'm talking to him and I can hardly hear him because the wind is so bad. Because he has a scarf wrapped around his face just so that, and his ear, so that the phone doesn't freeze to his ear. He's 69 years old. Why should he have to do that?
Yeah.
And he's not alone. And at Clinton, they have all of this snow up there. He's fallen a few times. I pray every day, and I'm thankful every day that he says that when he's fallen, he has not hurt himself.
Thank God.
Right? But they have nothing but ice. Like if you went to an ice skating rink, the yard is a sheet of ice. They do not put salt or dirt on it because they say it's not in their budget. So people are falling all day, every day, whenever they go outside in the yard. So when he goes outside to talk to me on the telephone, and so I always try to make sure that I catch his phone calls, because that kills me that he went outside in the freezing cold to call me and I wasn't there to get his phone call. Because I know that he's standing outside for 2 hours or 3 hours in the cold. And I know how I felt these days that it was cold outside and I couldn't get to where I was going fast enough. Because you don't have the luxury of saying, oh, I'm ready to go in. If it's 3 o'clock and you get outside, you stay outside until 5 o'clock.
Right.
If it's because it's the early day and the late day. So early day, he's out from 3 to 5. A late day, he's out from 6 to 9. So he's out from 6 to 9. So I asked him, baby, please don't call me at night. Because you know how cold it gets once the sun goes down. But he says, I'm not going to not call you. So he will come outside. So when we talk about the prison system and what goes on, it is more, and it's not because he complains. He don't complain like David don't complain, like Herman Bell, David Gilbert don't complain,
No.
Herman Bell don't complain.
Don't
None of
complain.
these people complain. But if people understood for real the horror that takes place in the prison system that we pay for, because it's our tax dollars, And our silence says that it's okay. So when we are silent about the issues that are going on both in the prison system, because the way that they treat elderly people in prison, it ain't much different than elderly people on the outside.
That's right.
So we got to make these politicians accountable that you should not be treating people in this way. This is the most inhumane, barbaric system that I could ever imagine. And I've never lived any place else. All I know is I always hear people talking about this is the greatest country in the world. If that is what they think, then that means that I don't even know what to think about other places. Because this place is brutal, it's barbaric, it's uncivilized. We go from the youngest people in prison in the world to the oldest people in prison in the world. To more than 80,000 people in this country in solitary confinement. Children in solitary confinement. When I go visit my husband, I see young brothers up there. And he says, babe, they got years they can't even imagine. They got years they can't even imagine, and their children. So there's so much that I could say about what it's like. It's terrifying. It's scary to me every single day when Sekou calls me and I say, how you doing, babe? And if one day he says fair to live Midland, or if he says,
then you got to worry.
That scares me. Because a toothache can cause you death. Sekou was sick for weeks.
With the pneumonia.
With pneumonia. Before he got diagnosed with it. He saw what they call a doctor twice. He had x-rays twice. The second time, the technician said, I don't know why the doctor didn't say he saw that spot. I see the same spot in the same space. That was pneumonia. He couldn't get off that cot for weeks. I didn't even hear from him. He had just, oh, I won't say that. But he couldn't call me.
Yeah.
And he didn't even tell me how sick he was because he thought he was on his way out. That was from 1 year. Not even 1 year. That was just a couple of months of being at Clinton. So just think about, if you can imagine your parents, if you're in your 60s, if you have parents who are still alive, think about if you can imagine your parents being in prison. And if you're not in your 60s, if you can think about your grandparent being in prison. Think about every single thing that you have done in your life for the past 25, 30 years, because that's what RAPP is about, right? If you're over 50 and you've done 25 years or more, then you should be out.
That's right.
So think about your life in the last 25 years and think about what you've been able to participate in. From the most minute, the minutia of your life, to the grandest, biggest dreams that you've had and accomplished. And think about your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your grandparent not being there to participate. Think about when your time comes to go to the other side, whose hand do you want to hold? Do you want to be in, would you want to be in a 6x9 dirty ass cell with noise, no quiet? If you can't even have a headache in prison because there's never any quiet. You know how sometimes you come home from work and you're like, I don't want the TV, I don't want the radio, I don't want nothing, I don't want the light, I just want quiet. Think about not having that for 32 years. Never having quiet. Never having hot water. There's no hot water in where he is. They got to boil the water. So every single thing, imagine being denied those things when you're 60 and 70 years old. So that's what that would be my message, is that if all of us on the outside put ourselves on the inside, we'd have the prison movement we need.
You're right.
Because not one of us should want for anybody else what we don't want for ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
First First, I want to say one more thing about Noah, which was that I didn't even understand at the time when he was dying, and we were discussing, could we apply for compassionate release? I was just out of prison, not even a year. And one of the lawyers said, and I had forgotten this, said he's not eligible. And I said, why isn't he eligible? Not eligible because he was convicted of murder.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some, in New York State, the law actually draws a line and says there are some human beings, so sorry you gave up your right to compassion. So that law is already there on the books, and it's going to take a lot to get that overturned. So we don't want to be in a position where all this talk about reform ends up with laws that cut out certain people. So that's why RAPP talks so much about risk. We talk about people convicted of murder. When people just want to talk about nonviolent offenders and that kind of stuff, we talk about people who did something who could be out. And don't label people with what they did when they were young. We also, there is legislation in front of the state legislature called the Safe Parole Act, which would be a very good thing, a very good thing if it were passed. It would change some of the terms of parole. But we also, and I think listening to the speakers, you know that we don't have time to wait to convince some of those upstate Republicans that they should come along with this. So while we support the Safe Parole Act, we are pushing on, right now, parole reform. And there is some momentum on that. The parole board's being kind of caught with not following the law that the state legislature has set, saying that they have to rely on risk assessment. And all of the people that we're talking about have gotten risk assessment scores, which involves interviews and psychological blah blah and all this stuff, low risk of recidivism, and yet they're not allowed out. So one of the things that we do with RAPP is we try to support the people who are going for parole. So I'm going to ask Barbara Innes, who we are so happy to have you here from Albany. She sometimes drives down just for RAPP meetings, and her husband's about to go for parole. We met because people inside have such strong relationships that another person that I visit told me, you got to talk to this woman, Barbara Innes. So here she is to talk to us. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
First, I want to thank my higher power for allowing me to be here in this space with your wonderful people on today, and thank RAPP for allowing me to be part of this program, and thank Columbia students and faculties for putting on this event. My name is Barbara Innes. My husband was sentenced to 25 to life through trial. He was allowed to come before the parole board twice already. He went to the parole board. He said he was innocent, and the first time they told him he lacked insight and remorse. But how can you have insight and remorse for something you did not do?
Right.
So at that parole board, he was eligible to go 6 months early for good behavior. So that speaks for his prison record. So when he went 6 months early, that's when they told him he was lacked insight and remorse. He went back 6 months after that, his original board, after serving a minimum of 25 years, his minimum imposed sentence that Larry talked about. And they told him that he was a threat to public safety and welfare. So he scored low on the risk assessment, compass risk assessment.
Right, the compass.
Meaning that he's less likely to reoffend or commit a new crime. And that's a tool that the parole board is supposed to be using and have not been using. And still denying people like over and over again. At one of the parole boards, they told my husband that you've done well. You have rehabilitated yourself. But they still denied him. So it's like no matter what you do, while you're on the inside, no matter how good you are, no matter how many degrees you get, for them it's still not enough. So what is? What will work? What will be enough?
Right.
You know? And I'm really grateful to RAPP for and for Reed for coming out. For coming out and leading this campaign because it's important. Because a lot of times, like my husband and a lot of other his friends or people I meet through, who his friends introduced me to, it's like they got to deal with this deep level of darkness and powerlessness that I can't even console. It's like no understanding to it because the system is broken. The New York State parole system is broken. And they breaking people, elders who are locked up. They breaking them down over and over and over again, hitting them 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a row. And I see this like, he talked about how we need our elders in our community.
Absolutely.
Because our elders, the wisdom, you know, our children is like, it's like just going wild. And we need our elders out here to help enlighten our children, share the wisdom that they have, you know, get them on the right track to going to college, you know, getting a good job, not committing crimes. So when this happens, we'll see a difference. There will be a difference because I have a young man that's been he's in Woodburn right now. He's been in the system for a while. He's 60 years old right now, and he goes to the board this March. And this week I kept getting a call on my phone from the counselor saying that I'm calling you to see if you could help this man have somewhere to go. So I didn't respond because I'm saying I got to check with my husband because this put me in a tight situation because my husband goes to the board in July. This man come out in March. So if I open up my home to him, so I say, well, he has somewhere to stay. I gotta really transition him out of my home real quick so the door's open for my husband.
Right.
So I made a few phone calls and I said, listen, I'm gonna need some help with this. You know, when this man come out, I need some feet on the ground to help me transition him to a room or apartment. You know, set him up with. I know where to take him to get the resources, but you know, I need help. I need help because I'm trying to focus on my husband's letter writing campaign, trying to get some help from him. But you know, this issue is so devastating that I'm gonna play it close. Like I'm gonna open my home to him. You know what I mean? Because it's sad when you in there and your family is just dying off, one member after another. And my husband recently lost his grandfather. Before that, he lost his grandmother, and his mother is getting up in age, so he worries about her. But yeah, I'm gonna take the risk, you know, and try to help this man.
All right, good for you.
So, personally, the tears on my pillow, the loneliness, the long rides, the excessive wear and tear on my vehicle, the short visits, robbing Peter to pay Paul just to make business regularly, and offering courage and hope that one day freedom will come. You know? Because when you look into somebody's eyes that have been to that parole board, and you have done your time, your minimum imposed sentence, and like Larry White said, and you're so hopeful, like, okay, now I did all I can do. I educated myself. I helped educate others. I've done everything I can do. I was good. I behaved well. I mean, I've done it all. And then they tell you, no, stamp it, 2 years. 2 years. And that's what they do. They hit you 2 years at a time. 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. And when you open that envelope and you see the now, it's like the life is just sucked out of you. It's like, it's hard to explain because it's something that you have to experience on your own. You know, it's deep. It's a deep remorse. It's a deep hurt. It's a deep disappointment. But even in that, you know, not only my husband, I visit others and I'll be like, hold on. With this life, there's hope. Hold on. Hold on. You can make it. Hold on. And I think RAPP allowed me to be on this panel.
Thank you.
Before I introduce Ariane, the last speaker, I just want to say again that so we're talking about doing something. And since our biggest opposition is actually not the parole board alone, but the political influences on the parole board,
Yes.
which are mostly, most of that influence comes from the police organizations, the law enforcement community, and the more conservative politicians. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, this is part of, if people were here last time, this is part of restorative justice. We're saying the community is taking back responsibility for healing damage that's done by violence in our communities, for deciding what is the way to deal with someone who commits a crime against another individual in our communities. We can't leave it to the politicians, we can't leave it to the police, because that's how we ended up where we are now. Ariane, who's a graduate student at Columbia, volunteered to help us bring the voices and the stories and the people, both who are currently incarcerated and the family stories, so that we can tell those stories and have them out there. And
thank you to everyone who's talked already, and for Reed for letting me be a part of this, and Laura too. I am doing research on long prison sentences, and so I was really grateful to be able to contribute in any way. And the thing that kind of stands out about my experience is how much I've gotten from talking to people, like way, way, way more than I could have imagined. You know, I approach this from kind of an academic standpoint, which is really valuable, but there's a way that you kind of lose hope when you're just talking about data and statistics. And meeting all these men and women who are experiencing this, or whose families are experiencing this, I'm just blown away by how open-minded and resilient and brilliant and powerful and wonderful they all are. And it makes me feel like, you know, I feel more hopeful. And I think that it's my generation's job to fix this thing. And so, you know, in doing these interviews, I talk about the parole process, and I want people to tell me what they've gone through. But the conversations, and people who I've talked to can attest to this, like I keep you around for a really long time, because I'm so moved by how smart everyone is, and all these ideas that people have about how to fix this. So we end up sort of having conversations about that as well. So, you know, on the one hand, I do look at this as, you know, we have to think about, you know, people who are dying and who are sick. But I also think that these people are resources. They're brilliant, and the level of humanity that people have extended to me, like they don't know me, and I come up and I ask them, you know, really personal, deep questions, and people have been so open and willing to talk, and you know, suggesting books to me, and it's been really amazing. And one woman I talked to, her son has been in prison for 30 years. She's 90. She has congestive heart failure. Her son, no, sorry, did I say her husband? Her son has been in prison for 30 years. He's got sciatica, so they only give him a standard size cane, and he's tall, so he has to lean over, which makes it more painful. And she referred to him as a prisoner of war, which
he is.
I really think that that's the truth about these people. They really are prisoners of war, and we all know that this is crazy. I think that we also have here a solution. You know, nobody understands this system on the outside and in the inside better than they do. So I think that we owe it to them to really work to get them out, to sort of dismantle this, because I think they're the ones who can lead us out of this.
They definitely can.
One of the guys I talked to told me that he's always telling me I should read stuff that I haven't heard of, but we both really like Dostoevsky, and he mentioned a book, and I can't remember which one it was, but he said that prison walls are built not just to keep people from getting out, but to keep people from seeing what's going on on the inside. And I think that's, you know, really poignant and relevant here. And you know, I feel so strongly about this, and I'm so moved by everyone else who's talked. And I hope that, you know, that there's a way that this can sort of propel us as people and as a community, that, you know, there is hope, and we can keep working through this, and we have to. We owe it to all these people who are still there, and their families.
And we owe it to ourselves.
I'll introduce Mujahid Farid, who started RAPP.
First, I just want to thank everyone for coming out today and supporting this project. I'd like to thank the audience. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel who spoke, gave their testimonies, excellent testimonies. And outside of the letters, I would implore everybody that to sign the petition, but not only sign our petition, but to take a blank copy of that petition home with you and have it filled out and mail it to us, because those petitions will have an impact. And what will have even greater impact than the petition, in our estimation, is what Laura mentioned, the personal letters to targeted commissioners on the parole board. And I know that this is having an impact, because when we was up in Albany a few weeks back, the parole commissioner that released me after we gave our workshop, after we did the workshop, she ran down, she started hugging me, telling me about the great work we're doing. And the second thing she mentioned was that the chair of the board got a letter that I sent to her.
Good.
And so I know that was important, something important in her mind. When we send these personal letters, they begin to feel the impact from the other side, not just the impact from law enforcement. And I understand that those personal letters are a more difficult task, but we did construct some instruction sheets as well as bios of the parole commissioners. And if anybody have the ability to do these personal letters, I hope that you take that on. All right, thank all of you.
Thank you, Farid.